Good afternoon, everyone. Here's where I think we are on the budget. I talked to the president yesterday morning, and then, as all of you know and have reported, he met with 10 of our members for a couple of hours last night. And at lunch, we had an opportunity to talk to the members who were in the meeting, hoping that we could find a bipartisan way forward. Our members who were in the meeting felt that the president seemed to be more interested in that than his staff did, or that it seems like the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate are. So here's where I think we're headed. It looks like the majority is going to have us vote on the motion to proceed to the budget this afternoon. They've chosen a totally partisan path. I can't remember a budget in the time that I've been here that either side has ever voted in a bipartisan way, so we're off to a totally partisan start. I think that's unfortunate. I think our 10 members laid out a proposal that could have gotten broad bipartisan support, given the new administration a chance to get a bipartisan victory here early, but they are in the majority in the House and Senate, and life is a series of choices, and they've chosen. So we'll go down that path. That means we'll be facing multiple amendments later in the week. And then, as the majority leader has announced, we'll be on the impeachment trial next week. That's an agreement that he and I reached sometime back. The only thing new I know on the impeachment front is that the president's lawyers seem to be comfortable with the pre-trial agreement that the majority leader and I reached, so it looks like we'll be on impeachment next week. So that's where we are, and with that, let me turn to Senator Thin.
Well, thanks, Leader. It is February 2nd. It's Groundhog Day, and things keep repeating themselves. The president continues to repeat himself and say that he wants to work with Republicans in Congress on a bipartisan solution to coronavirus relief, and Senator Schumer repeatedly undermines any efforts at bipartisan cooperation. As the leader pointed out, we had a group of folks who met with the president last night. Again, I think he did echo that he would like to see us come up with something that's bipartisan, and I would point out that we have now done 5 bipartisan coronavirus relief packages. 5. When we were in the majority, every one of those, we did it the old-fashioned way and got 60 votes for it. And now, of course, they're deciding to do this in a very partisan way with one party and to try and get everything in their agenda enacted that they can. Now, there are a couple things on their list of things that they want to get done, and one of the issues evidently that sort of separated the two sides yesterday was state and local funding. And I think it was pointed out to President Biden, I'm not sure he'd seen this before, that if you look at last year, 2019 to 2020, year-over-year revenues to state governments were at or higher than they were the year before. So this idea that these the states across the country are clamoring for or needing additional relief just doesn't square with the facts. One of the other things that they want to do is they want to lift the cap on the deductibility of state and local taxes, which was something that was enacted as part of the 2017 tax reform bill. That was a reform that was made, and if they do that, all it will do is help out wealthy people in basically high-tax states. I mean, it is a tax giveaway to high-income taxpayers in high-tax states. And so those are a couple of issues that, as far as I'm concerned, make no sense and don't have a place on the budget process that we're talking about right now. So I hope that the Democrats will come back to the table and that the leadership here in the Congress, Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer, will start to reflect the sentiments that are being shared by the president, because it seems to me right now that they are on completely different wavelengths when it comes to coronavirus relief.
Today is day 14 of the Biden administration. On day 1, President Biden talked about unity. He said, if we're united, we can do great things. And then he turned around and put out 25 executive orders. So many that the New York Times had an opinion piece, and it said, ease off on executive orders. The president then painted a target on the back of American energy and American energy workers. And the statement that came out of the administration on this, with regard to renewable energy, was they said it was false hope and misleading information. Now the administration wants a $1.9 trillion relief bill. And once again, it is loaded with things completely unrelated to coronavirus. And they plan to cram it down the throats of the American people on a purely party line vote. You take a look at some of the things that are in it. It is to provide government checks to families making in excess of $250,000 a year. It's paying people more to not work than to work, with enhanced unemployment and unemployment bonuses. It's a federal mandate to small businesses that are struggling all across the country to double the minimum wage. For the small businesses in Wyoming who are struggling today, it's going to be almost impossible to make payroll. And even the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, understands this, because they said if they do this mandate of doubling the minimum wage, that 1.3 million people would lose their jobs. And then, of course, there are these bailouts to big cities and blue states that have been basically having a history of bad behavior when it comes to spending. Joe Biden spent a year running for president on a unity platform. We've done 5 coronavirus relief bills in a bipartisan way. If the president wants to do things in a united way, we ought to do the next coronavirus relief package also in a bipartisan way.
We spent some time at lunch today talking to our members who've never been part of this process about how the process works, and I think there was a lot of surprise that it actually leads nowhere. You get no bill signed into law. You have a debate that's largely political, but you really do stretch out the time that you might have used otherwise to get something done. You know, the Democrats are saying they'd like to do this 3 times in the next 18 months. I think they're about to find out in the next 6 weeks or so just how hard it is, one, to pass a budget in a 50-50 Senate. As the leader said, I'm not aware of any time when anybody in the minority side ever voted for a budget, so that means everybody has to be there. I'm also not aware of any time when everybody was there on the majority side voting for a budget. They're sending directions to almost every committee in the Senate with some directions to find pay-fors, I suppose, and those have to be back by February the 16th. I think the deadline that we're going to be facing here pretty quickly is the mid-March deadline that we put on increased unemployment assistance. Democrats will be lucky to get to that deadline using this process, and my guess is they'll be a lot less enthusiastic about using it 2 more times than they're telling me and all of you that we're going to do this 3 times in the next 2 years, which means 3 times between now and a year and a half from now.
I've said many times over that if we are focusing on a COVID-19 relief package, it does need to be bipartisan, and it needs to be laser focused on fighting COVID-19. Now, we have passed 5 bills in the past, just as my colleagues have said, 5 bills, bipartisan. What's different? This administration. So we need to come together. President Biden has been preaching unity, unity, unity. So we really need to come together. If this is the right thing to do, let's do it in a bipartisan manner. Remain, again, laser focused on COVID-19 and not including a bunch of liberal priorities like a $15 minimum wage, which in Iowa would hammer our small businesses when they are trying to get back on their feet. They are most vulnerable right now. We all know the way to create a healthy economy right now is by getting our kids back in school and getting them educated, making sure that businesses are opening again, and for heaven's sakes, opening back up our child care centers. So I am so thankful that we have a number of Republicans that are working, trying to work in a bipartisan manner on a package that makes sense. And I'm very thankful that they have included my work on child care. So let's move ahead in a smart manner, but let's do it in a way where we are creating unity, just as President Biden wants to see.
I had the opportunity to go to the Biden inauguration and heard a speech about unity. And then what I've watched over the last 2 weeks, just the opposite. I mean, there's nothing about unity. The Democrats don't want to work with Republican senators. We all want to continue to do everything we can to help the people who've lost their job, help our small businesses get open. And by the way, that's not what this bill would do. Since March, I've been talking about the fact that we shouldn't be bailing out blue states. Florida taxpayers, many of them left Illinois, California, and New York. We shouldn't be bailing out the budgets of these states. They don't want to pay for their pension plans. They have budgets dramatically more per person than we do in Florida. Florida taxpayers shouldn't be paying for this. I'm glad the president saw the chart yesterday about the J.P. Morgan study that showed that state revenues are basically not down. They're basically not down at all, not even down 1%. And then we're starting to look at the budgets that are coming out. California's budget's going to be up 12%. New York's budget, I think, is up over 8.7%. What these states have seen is all the money we've given them. We've given them over $400 billion. They can use it and spread it around because we paid for 100% of all their coronavirus costs. So I hope the president talks to Schumer and Sanders and Pelosi and says, why are you giving all this money to states when we have $27 trillion worth of debt already?
Leader McConnell.
Leader McConnell.
Leader McConnell.
Leader McConnell.
Leader McConnell.
Leader
Yeah.
McConnell.
Have you spoken to Leader McCarthy about Marjorie Taylor Greene or Liz Cheney? What outcome would you like to see with them, and why did you choose to weigh in on them yesterday?
Well, first of all, Leader McCarthy and I have a good working relationship. I did yesterday express myself on that particular new member of the House, and I think I adequately spoke out about how I feel about any effort to define the Republican Party in such a way. I think that pretty well covers my view on that.
Leader McConnell.
Manu?
Do you wish, though, you spoke out about Donald Trump's conspiracies about the election being stolen much earlier than you ultimately did?
Well, with regard to the former president, we're going into an impeachment trial next week. We're all going to listen to what the lawyers have to say and making the arguments and work our way through it.
Leader
Yeah.
It sounds like you've had a conversation now with President Biden about what's going on in Burma. Was there anything else? Did you guys talk off topic about possibly more COVID relief or about his meeting last night with your colleagues?
Well, the president called me on two things. Burma was one of them. The other one was the issue we were talking about earlier with regard to the budget process and COVID relief. As I think you know, because we've talked about this before, I've had a long-standing interest in the situation in Burma, a long-standing relationship with Aung San Suu Kyi. I have stuck with her in recent years as everyone has basically thrown her under the bus with regard to the accommodations she seemed to have to make with the military in order to keep the civilian government from being disbanded. In spite of all that, what's now happened is the military government has disbanded the democracy. So regardless of how the countries around the world may feel about the previous criticism of her, she now stands for democracy in Burma. So the president called me about that to ask my ideas. Secretary Blinken did as well. I think it's an area where we, on a bipartisan basis, ought to support the strongest possible sanctions the administration can levy against any of these military leaders that we haven't levied sanctions against, and do it with one voice and try to unify the rest of the world in our position, up to and including maybe trying to do something in the UN to see if the Russians and the Chinese would actually veto it.
Sir, and then on your
Do you go into the impeachment trial still having an open mind about the
Well,
president's
look, I want to
conduct?
listen to the arguments. I think that's what we ought to do. That's what I said before it started. That's still my view. The issue upon which we already voted, I think, is an interesting constitutional question. I think we ought to listen to the lawyers argue the question. Thanks a lot.